right now. Wilson, your #2 overall seed, so he'll have the option to go first. The Pro Tour runner-up, also just top-8 Pro Tour Fate Reforged. We'll take a look and get ready to rock and roll here as he is signing something, I think, to give to Ross. This is a, oh boy, oh boy. This is getting in his head early.
Oh.
Jacob getting in his head a little early here and now playing a Sansep Citadel. See, he's quiet. He's a quiet kid.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
You know why? Because people don't do that in Magic anymore.
They don't. Signing his player card, passing it over to Ross. I'm not sure what Ross can do to keep up with that.
Nothing. The match is, we just need to cut to the other match. This one's done.
Tough to watch there. Wilson establishing dominance early here with the Temple of Malady as well.
I have not seen something like that in a while.
Yeah, a real heel tactic on the eve of WrestleMania, I tell you what.
I'll tell you what, though. Jacob better win the match now. You better, if you're going to sign the player card on camera, you better win.
Here's a mountain from Merriam and just passing the turn back. You have to imagine a Boonsader will be coming here in just a moment. There's Nurborg. Wilson will pass the turn back. A 4-2 with Flash is on the way. There's Boonsader.
Surprise.
Yeah. Isn't it a surprise? Tough to say.
So I think that Ross has a pretty solid recipe for this kind of matchup. You see decks that try to play big threats against Abzan decks, and you get chewed up by downfalls and so forth. You have decks like Mono Red that try to flood the board, but then Siege Rhino or Drown in Sorrow post board are really problematic. Ross has acceleration into flyers, which means that he can play things ahead of schedule and tax the removal spells. He can also play flyers, so things like Siege Rhino don't stabilize the board as easily.
No flyers just yet. Just Air of the Wild is another copy of Elvish Mystic before passing the turn back. Wilson will deploy a Siege Rhino, able to use that Windswept Teeth for mana thanks to Urborg. A little drain, a little gain. We head back Merriam's way. Merriam will take a draw here. See if he does have one of his flying creatures in Stormbreath Dragon or Thunderbreak Regent. He's tapping mana right now. Feels like a Stormbreath Dragon to me, but it'll be a Boonsader here that'll be bestowed onto the Heir of the Wilds. That thing's pretty big right now. Siege Rhino can't really profitably get in the way.
Yeah, that's a trade, and I think that Jacob's likely to decline. Not even a trade, because the air now triggers off of itself. Combo deck.
Doubted. Jacob gonna take some damage here.
Now there are some answers in Ross's deck to a Siege Rhino. 4 copies of Crater's Claws in the main deck roast. He can also just fly over the top with Stormbreath Dragon and Thunderbreak Regent and so forth.
I think that's typically the plan here for Ross too, is to fly over the top of the card. He just hasn't drawn any of his flyers yet. Wilson's gonna cast a Thoughtseize. He's gonna go a little bit lower. Ross will show a hand. You see a Crater's Claws. There's also an Elvish Mystic hanging out over there. So a couple options here for Jacob. So he goes a little bit lower. Draconic Roar, the other card here, but Jacob, no interest in taking that card.
And definitely a path to stabilization now in Jacob's hand. You see Elspeth Sun's Champion. The Crater's Claws is gone. Ross is all on the ground right now.
Here comes the air yet again. The trigger will give it +1/+1 when it does attack.
I mean, this is a big hit to take and puts him into Crater's Claw's range. And if the plan is to stabilize with Elspeth, maybe worth the chump block right now.
Yeah. See Ross really valuing these Elvish Mystics highly as well. Could be maybe attacking with those as well, but he's a little short on mana.
Well, the other issue is just, you know, it's one of those spots where Ross is unsure whether or not Jacob is going to run a block there. And if you're unsure, if you attack with the Elvish Mystic, it gives a really big incentive for Jacob to run a block there. If Ross was sure that there was going to be a chump block, I'm sure you would have seen him attack with the Elves, but he's not working with that certainty.
Merriam going to figure out exactly what he can do now. He'll play Wrecked Highlands and gain a life. There's another copy of Elvish Mystic and a passing of the turn. Wilson will untap that Urborg. He'll take a draw step. Only a few cards in hand here for Jacob. You mentioned Elspeth. That's the scary one. Looks like Wilson does not have the land, however, so just another Siege Rhino. Pass that turn back.
And no land's a big deal. Obviously, you can't cast Elspeth, and a lot of the lands in the deck just come into play tapped. So even if he rips a land, no guarantee it allows him to deploy Elspeth next turn.
Merriam reaching for some mana here. 4 of it to be exact. There's Sorek the Hunt Caller.
Hoo-hoo.
Formidable will be triggered, and I like attacking with everyone, and so does Ross.
Yep.
Looks like Sorek will get blocked, so we'll have 7, 8, 9 damage come across here. Siege Rhino will trade with Sorek, presumably.
Big draw there for Ross.
Not bad at all. Again, he still wants to be in the air, and he hasn't drawn the cards to do that just yet. Wilson, however, he needs a land. He needs one right now.
And now even if he draws a land, you know, he's going to take some points here, at least one with the Windswept Heath. And now Crater's Claws, the one left in Ross's deck, very live. But Elspeth's huge here.
There is Elspeth. Three soldiers coming. 3 Crater's Claws to draw to here from Merriam. Does have Draconic Roar in hand, but yet again, that one's not really going to play much of a role at this point. Wouldn't be surprised if Ross sideboards those out right away. He has 2 of those in his main deck, because he'll take a draw step here. Looking for a Stormbreath Dragon, looking for a Thunderbreak Regent. Regent certainly the worst of the 2.
I mean, ripping any dragon allows him to Draconic Roar away a token and redirect 3 to Elspeth if he wants to. At that point, there's no way for Jacob to block to save Elspeth.
Yeah.
So any dragon's a big draw here.
Merriam going to think about it. Not sure what the draw step was. Quick update for you guys on our other match. Todd Anderson very quickly up a game over Jason Coleman. Jeskai Tokens taking the lead over Obs on aggro very quickly as Merriam reaching for some creatures, deciding where they're going to go. Haven't seen Elspeth play the role of roadblock in some time, but is certainly doing it right now.
Yeah, the beatdown decks all feel so fast now that Elspeth rarely has time to get deployed. In the mid-range matchups, Elspeth can be good, but, you know, often just eats an under end or a Hero's Downfall type effect. This is the type of matchup where Elspeth's very, very good.
Another Boon Satyr. Tokens will bite the dust. We'll head back Jacob's way. Jacob will take a draw step here. Elspeth doing a nice job of helping him to begin to stabilize.
And no trample on Ross's side of the table here, so these 3 tokens are a lot to slog through. I mean, Jacob's on defense big time, so there's a lot of time for Ross to find Crater's Claws.
Courser will net a Sandstep Citadel. Trigger, of course, will gain a life. Top card here for Jacob's deck is CDC, Undead Vizier.
And that is huge because it's not going to be hard to exploit with Elspeth in play.
Elspeth will go up to 6. 3 more soldiers will join the battlefield. Ross really hoping for a card like Crater's Claws right now to end this game. Again, 3 to draw to. He'll take a draw step. A deep breath there from Merriam. Does not look like what he was looking for.
I mean, he can keep sending in the team here, or at least sending in his large creatures, but he's not going to be making forward progress. And Sidisi is bad news.
Yeah, it's not good news at all for Merriam. And every land that Wilson is able to find gets him further out of Crater's Claws range as well. Because right now, Crater's Claws would be lethal. But he gains a life, and he does have the ability to do that with the right draws. Maybe another Courser. Then he's doing okay. Siege Rhino as well. Again, Merriam with Draconic Roar in hand. Has not found a dragon yet this game. And not entirely sure what the draw step was, though, again, given his reaction, leads me to believe it was not a great one.
I mean, his play is pretty fast here if he drew something big.
Yeah. There are the Wilds to go after Elspeth. A predictable chump block there from Wilson. All Merriam can do is pass the turn back. We head back Jacob's way. Sidisi is the draw. Top card of the deck is a Satyr Wayfinder. Part of the reason Jacob playing that card is because he wants some ammunition for Sidisi's exploit.
Tassiger as well. A Murderous Cut.
Yep.
And his deck doesn't have a lot to do on turn 2, so a lot of small factors.
Wilson will think things through now. Trying to figure out what Merriam might have in this situation. What are his outs? What can he draw to? Crater's Claws, of course, being the big one. Also, what does Sidisi want to search for in this situation? Wilson does have some interesting one-ofs in his deck, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's nothing that can shut the door this turn on Crater's Claws being a draw. But he can get something like Siege Rhino, for example, which the following turn pulls him out.
I think that's what Jacob's trying to figure out as he goes here.
Garrick Apex Predator, another card that gives an opportunity to gain a lot of life. So he has no knockout punch this turn, but next turn it gets really good.
Wilson going to sacrifice a Windswept Heath. He'll get a Forest. Of course, he'll lose one, then gain one thanks to Courser of Crewfix. So he's going to stay at 8. Merriam will shuffle up, and we'll see the top card of the deck thanks to Courser here in just a moment. Well, well.
Howdy.
A Siege Rhino, a very powerful Magic card.
What are you doing here? What are you up to?
That may change Jacob's decision-making process.
The incentive does go down for him to tutor quite a bit when it's going to be the draw step anyway.
Yeah. Wilson gonna, looks like, maybe tick down Elspeth. He will. Which means Air of the Wilds and the Llanowar Waste are gonna, or Elvish Mystic will bite the dust. The Boon Satyrs will, of course, stay, thanks to Bestow.
And what this does is it does shut off Crater's Claws as an out for next turn unless Ross has another mana. Because he can only claws for 7 on the board.
Elspeth will come down. It'll take care of these, which will even further slow down Crater's Claws because now no Ferocious.
And now the door is shut on that, and Siege Rhino is still available to be drawn next turn.
Yep.
So Jacob really pulling himself out of his range. And at this point, there's a lot of pressure on Ross to find something like Storm Breath Dragon real fast because his burn spells don't work anymore.
Take a draw. Now it's basically got to be Storm Breath Dragon. Thunderbreak Region's okay, but almost feels like Storm Breath Dragon.
Very slow.
Yeah. That's not what the doctor ordered. Just an Elvish Mystic and a passing of the turn. Wilson's going to draw that Siege Rhino. Top card of the deck is a Temple of Silence. Going to very quickly play that. Go up to 9. Take a look at the Scry. Temple of Malady is the top card.
You can see why Jacob tanked so long last turn. What he was trying to find out most of all is there a way for me to shut the door on Crater's Claws? He's found a way to do that. And now he's got more than enough resources to work with here to take over the game.
Utter end of the top card of the deck. 3 soldiers coming thanks to Elspeth.
And Jacob can go from defense to offense here very quickly with Elspeth in play. Ross is already at 12.
And he's starting to turn the corner right now as he reaches for those soldier tokens and gets into the red zone. Doesn't seem like great blocks available for Merriam. Elspeth doing a fantastic job of stabilizing things for Wilson this game. Now Merriam has to figure out how he can win. Before it was, okay, Wilson needs to figure out what's the best thing that he can do. He found the line that he was looking for to shut a lot of windows for Ross. Now Ross has to figure out, okay, what are my running draws maybe get me back into this game?
I feel like some back-to-back Storm Breaths may help Ross get back into it, but a lot is not his creatures aren't effective anymore. Jacob's got too much on the board, and he's got a removal spell coming next turn. So it's got to just be a bunch of Storm Breaths in a row, I feel like.
Maybe Storm Breath into Crater's Claws, something like that. See, Draconic Roar is going to take down a token. No dragon to reveal, unfortunately, for Merriam. Elvish Mystic will trade with a token. Ross has got to do kind of this weird balancing act now of what to chump block, how to go about doing it. Here's Sidisi. Wilson exploited token.
And it wouldn't surprise me if he's getting ultimate price in this spot, which cuts off Storm Breath Dragon.
That or a Murder's Cut, some sort of removal spell. Make sure he can't lose to running dragons at this point.
Right, because he's got an Utter End on top of his deck, but Utter End is no help if Storm Breath Dragon's the card he's worried about.
Yeah, now here's Bile Blight to shoot those down. So that'll work too because now Ross can't even play Storm Breath Dragon. Now Caves of Koilos on top of the deck, and Merriam is going to concede the game. So Jacob Wilson, thanks to Elspeth, Sun's champion, and a timely top deck of a land that is untapped, wins game number 1 here over Ross Merriam. Abzan control. Up a game over green-red aggros. These players are going to go to the drawing board.
It feels like you mentioned, we haven't really seen a game like that in a very long time where this beatdown deck on the ground, it's doing its thing, it's making, blocking hard. Jacob can't really use his removal spells very effectively. Siege Rhino's chump blocking, and Elspeth shows up, and that's kind of the whole game. Ross did have some draws for a couple turns there, but Elspeth was able to undo all of Ross's work.
We will start with Merriam, and we will take a look at his sideboard. You'll find 3 copies of Hornet Nest, 3 Destructive Revelry, 3 Wild Slash, a Nissel World Waker, 3 Xenagos the Reveler, and 2 copies of Roast.
I think this is pretty straight up here. I think that Ross wants access to his Planeswalkers, which are pretty powerful in this matchup, and the additional copies of Roast. Roast just seems great in any sort of Siege Rhino matchup. I think that Xenagos and Nissa are occasionally a little bit clunky in these sort of matchups because the Abzan deck can be very good at blocking, but backed up by 2 copies of Roast, they should be very good.
2 Fleecemane Lions, Virulent Plague, a Back to Nature, a Bile Blight, Ultimate Price, Nissel World Waker, and Ugin the Spirit Dragon, to go along with 2 Drowning Sorrows, 2 Duress, and then Hostilities, and 2 copies of Read the Bones.
So I'm a big fan of the end Hostilities here. I like the 2 Fleecemane Lions to shore up the early game. It's also a very powerful thing to set up alongside the end Hostilities, and the individual pieces of spot removal here, the Bile Blight, the Ultimate Price especially, are very good here. I think some of the other Planeswalkers are a little bit, in Ugin's case, a little bit too slow. In this case, I don't think it impacts the board enough. It doesn't shore up his vulnerability to flyers, so I wouldn't really want to go down the Planeswalker route, but the end Hostilities and the removal spells and the Fleecemane Lions should be very good.
Well, Jason Coleman did win game number 2 against Todd Anderson. Those two are certainly in a back-and-forth affair. Anderson will be on the play for game number 3. While we wait for game number 2 here, we will talk about Season 2 of the Open Series schedule. We've actually got our first Season 2 event taking place behind us, our 2-day 20K Standard Open. We will crown a champion there, give someone $5,000 and a handful of Open Series points. But next weekend is where the real fun begins. We'll be in Syracuse.
Yeah, we're in Syracuse for the first full Open Series of Season 2. Week off for the Pro Tour and the State Championship, so you want to head over to starcitygames.com/states to get more information there. Providence, Cleveland, and Seattle all have Standard Opens. Those will be running to the beginning of May. Then we go to Dallas, 2 weeks after Dallas, in Worcester for a Legacy Open Series. And then our first ever Modern Invitational, Season 2 in Columbus, Ohio, tied to the Origins Game Fair, Modern and Standard as the invitational formats, with a 2-day, $20,000 Modern Open Series. That will be June 5th through 7th with me, you, and Matthias Hunt in the booth.
And what's great about all these Season 2 dates is that we are giving away a special playmat for all of these dates. It is the Penguin Punch playmat that you do see here. We actually gave it away at this particular Open Series event. This will take place throughout all of Season 2. So Season 2 is a shorter season. Make sure you do come out to those shows so you can get this. No other way to get this free limited edition playmat.
Listen, the Warner Brothers, they were first to market with this sort of thing. But Animals Boxing is just the funniest thing on earth. That's just true.
Just beating the crap out of a polar bear.
Yeah. It's got a fish in its mouth. Unclear if the penguin wanted to eat that fish or if the fish was a buddy. But in any event, it's come to blows, and here it is.
Available until May 23rd during Season 2 of the Open Series as we turn our attention back to Merriam and Wilson. Merriam got off to a pretty good start there, but you can tell just how important it is for him to find flyers in this matchup.
For sure. Jacob does have the 2 copies of Elspeth. They're not going to appear in every single game, but with Siege Rhino, with removal spells, and the 2 copies of Elspeth, Jacob's going to be able to lock up the ground most games, assuming he has a functional draw. At that point, there's a lot of pressure on Ross to find some of his flyers. Stormbreath Dragon being especially sweet because it has haste and protection from some of the removal spells.
So I don't think a ton is going to change on Merriam's side. The tough thing here, I think, for Ross is that none of his sideboard cards are anything that really get me excited about the matchup. Nothing that's really a haymaker against an Abzan control deck.
Yeah, Jacob does make some upgrades. Now, his answers to the systemic problems of the matchup on his side of the table don't get cleaned up that much. The end hostilities helps a lot. But for example, Fleecemane Line I think is good in the matchup, but if Jacob is vulnerable somewhere, it's to flyers, and Fleecemane Line doesn't help there. The 1 Ultimate Price is a big addition, but I do think Jacob gets the slightly better end of it in the sideboards, but I think most of the substance of the matchup is what these 2 players are doing game 1.
Flyers, flyers, flyers. That's what we're looking for. A little bit of acceleration into him as well. Merriam's going to keep his opening hand. Wilson will take a look at his. Again, Anderson and Coleman are in game number 3 right now. They are even up. Todd Anderson will be on the play. When we have updates for you, we'll let you know, of course, as Merriam will start with a Rugged Highlands. will go Wilson's way. He has his hand step Citadel. Back to Merriam we go. A Forest, a Rattleclaw Mystic for acceleration, and a passing of the turn. Wilson's draw is a Thoughtseize. We'll see if he wants to fire that off or not, as he does deploy a Forest and just passes the turn back over to Merriam.
If he's not Thoughtseizing, he's probably leaving up something like Ultimate Price.
There's a Wooded Foothills for Ross. He'll go back down to 20. Forest or Mountain coming. There is that Mountain. Here is Thunderbreak Regent.
And if there's Ultimate Price in Jacob's hand, definitely paid off for this decision.
Yeah. Looks like it is. There's the price. Wilson will have to take 3 to kill it, but certainly worth it.
Definitely. Now the hope is he can untap, he can Thoughtseize. Ross has a hand of something like mana, one big threat, and Jacob can strip that threat, and then always facing off against his Rattleclaw Mystic in the top of Ross's deck.
Wilson will untap, take a draw. You mentioned the Thoughtseize. He does have that in his hands. Hater Wayfinder the draw this turn.
That's a great draw too, because it's going to require some sort of answer. At some point, Ross is going to have to transition over to attacking with the Rattleclaw Mystic. So it looks innocuous, but that's a helpful draw too.
Wilson with the Temple of Silence. He'll start with the Temple to get a little more information. Top card will go to the bottom. Here's a Thoughtseize. So now we get an idea of what Merriam is working with another copy of Thunderbreak Regent, a Boon Satyr, a Wooded Foothills, and a Goblin Rabblemaster. It's still a good hand.
Very good hand. Ross needed a second impactful threat at this stage. And he's got 3, in fact.
Indeed. Boon Satyr may be the worst of the bunch, and it's still pretty good.
Yep.
Wilson will go through his paces. He's got a real decision to make now.
Even the Boon Satyr is pretty good at its insulation against end hostilities.
Yeah.
And Jacob's only 2 mana away from that, so everything in Ross's hand right now, very good. And this is about as on curve of a draw that Abzan control is capable of getting. And even still, Ross might just be able to stick threats ahead of schedule and put Jacob in a spot where he can't deploy everything on time. You know, you see his hand, he's got things like Abzan Sham, Corsair Crewfix, Sidrino, all powerful cards, but all of them are his whole turn. And if he's on the back foot already at 15, he might just not quite get enough time to get everything out of his hand.
It's classic Abzan. Yeah. You know, when they are playing one spell a turn, they're obviously a good deck. When they're playing multiple spells a turn, they're a great deck. We don't know if he's ever going to get to the point where he can play multiple spells a turn. If he does, I don't imagine Ross will be winning.
Well, Jacob's deck's way more powerful in that spot.
Yeah.
No question about it.
That's what makes a card like Murderous Cut so great in the deck. If you're able to play, Siege Rhino and Cut in the same turn, beating them is pretty tough then.
Especially, and Ultimate Price is really big for that reason too.
Yeah.
Bioblite's hard for this deck to cast on the second turn. Ultimate Price much easier, as we see in this very game.
Rabblemaster, the choice there from Wilson on the Thoughtseize. Merriam, he'll draw a card. He'll play his Wooded Foothills. Deploy Thunderbreak Regent, serve him with Rattleclaw Mystic, put Wilson down to 13. That'll be Merriam's turn, hoping the Dragon can stay around for a little while.
And now this is a spot where Ross is hoping that Jacob is never in a position to play 2 spells in a turn. If he's able to get to something like Murderous Cut and a threat, that's where Jacob starts to stabilize a little bit. But if he's treading water the whole time and Ross is able to get in these chip shots, Ross might be able to win with the beatdowns or set himself in a position where Crater's Claws is lethal and he has multiple turns to draw it.
Satyr Wayfinder. A Temple of Silence, a Windswept Heath, a Corsair of Crewfix, and a Plains are the cards Wilson will reveal.
And if this is the start to Jacob's turn, I think it implies that he has Murderous Cut in hand.
It certainly feels that way.
Because he knows about the Boon Satyr, so he doesn't even have an attractive block this turn. And it's very hard for him to justify using his turn finding a land if he has anything else to do.
He's going to select the Plains. Perhaps he was looking for a land that entered the battlefield untapped, but he just plays his handstep Citadel and will pass the turn back. Representing Murderous Cut here as Merriam will take a draw. Ross very quickly playing Boon Satyr on his Thunderbreak Regent. And now he's going to serve in. There is Murderous Cut. It'll trigger the Thunderbreak Regent. Merriam hoping for the best there. Did not work out though.
And this is the turn where Jacob starts getting it turned over.
Yep, that's 2 spells, 1 turn.
Yep. He's got Rhino and Courser, Obzon Charm in hand. He's got a lot of good tools to work with. There is still the threat of Crater's Claws in all of this.
Of course.
It may take Jacob a little while here to start getting on the offensive, and maybe it requires 2 Crater's Claws, or maybe it requires more mana or a Storm Breath Dragon on top of it, but the window is still open for Ross here.
There is Siege Rhino to begin the stabilization process. A Temple of Abandon here from Merriam. We'll take a look at the top card. It becomes the bottom card. Has he found a Storm Breath Dragon yet is the question. That's a roast.
It's not bad.
Will he attack with both?
This is another one of those spots where it's borderline if Jacob chump blocks in this spot. And if it's borderline, if you, from your perspective, if your opponent's going to chump block, it's often a mistake to send in the creature that they can trade with.
Sure. The chump block does occur there from the Satyr Wayfinder. We head back Wilson's way. Looks like it may be time for a Courser. And it is. Take a look at the top card of the deck. It's a Temple of Malady. That'll come into play very quickly. Trigger, of course, from the Courser will bring Wilson up to 14. Elspeth is the top card of the deck. That was a game winner last time. Might be a game winner again.
Yeah, Jacob not making Jacob will keep it.
Yeah.
I think he already has one in hand, and he's still keeping the second one because it's so good.
Merriam has taken his draw step, and now it's time to look things over.
And another problem with Elspeth in this matchup for Ross's side, besides locking up the ground, is that a big part of Ross's game plan is Crater's Claws once we get to this stage. And Elspeth is powerful against that in 2 ways. One, the plus power cuts off the number of turns that Ross has to find it. And the second, there's times like we saw in the first game where the math is such where Jacob can minus it, take care of all of Ross's 4 power creatures, and then the Ferocious is turned off.
Decisions here for Merriam. You can kind of feel the walls closing in on this game.
Yep. And I think that's part of the reason that Jacob's keeping the second Elspeth. One is it's so good that it's worth having as an insurance policy. The other reason is I think Jacob can see the game going into a space potentially where he wants to be minusing and then casting an Elspeth and plussing it in the same turn.
There's a mountain. It's a fireball. Crater's Claws says, we're going upstairs. You.
And Ross just puts it, thuds it down into the graveyard, says go. He knows where the game's at. Yeah, he's getting his head kicked in. He still might be able to burn Ross out. It is what it is.
Yep.
No one has any misunderstanding about what the game's about right now.
Sometimes it's fireball, hope to draw another fireball. Sometimes that's just what it is. There's a Temple. Wilson going to go up to 7. Bioblight on top of the deck. We'll see if he wants to leave it there. Look, it doesn't have to be pretty.
No.
But it can be effective. Wilson will tap out. Merriam very quickly untapping. He'll take a draw step here.
He's got some big draws.
Yep, Temple of Abandon. Top card goes to the bottom. Pass that turn back. Siege Rhino's on top of the deck. Elspeth will tick up.
So now, I mean, it's next turn probably or bust, and Jacob might be very proactive in using a removal spell to close that off if he can.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. Here comes the Courser. There's a Bioblight. Get that out of the way.
Yeah, that was the requisite mana for a lethal Crater's Claws. And with Siege Rhino coming, I mean, Ross still has some draw steps. He can still find Stormbreath Dragon, for example.
Surak's okay. Actually just not very good.
It just dies.
Yeah, it just dies. Actually, it's just not very good at all. Oh, no, another Siege Rhino now.
You can see a little shrug there from Ross's side. I mean, the first Siege Rhino was going to be very hard to beat. The second one, maybe impossible.
And you talked about the closing speed, too.
Right. And when I say the second one, I mean the third one.
Yep, there's a Force on top of the deck, and that is going to do it. Jacob Wilson's going to win game number 2 here over Ross Merriam. Obzon control in a dominating position right now over green-red aggro.
It's been the same recipe each game, which is, so far at least, which is just weather the storm of the early offense, use your removal spells and chump block, try to get one turn where it's stabilized, and then get to Elspeth. From there, Ross has some draw steps. He still has Stormbreath Dragon, he has Crater's Claws, but the amount of cards in his deck that matter once Elspeth is in play, it's not that many. It's a couple flyers, and it's the burn spells.
And the tough part is, when we take a look at the sideboard yet again, it's just there's really not much for Merriam to bring in here. 3 Hornet Nest, 3 Destructive Revelry, 3 Wild Slash. Nissa's good. Xenaghost is okay, and then Roast is for Siege Rhinos, but there's no real haymaker that says, Jacob Wilson, I'm here to beat you.
Right. It's a lot of these cards are I mean, we're looking at the bottom 3 cards on that list as the cards we suspect Ross brought in. And those cards are pretty potent, but not against Elspeth. Nissa can be okay sometimes. Xenagos is quite poor. Roast is quite poor as well. So Ross's sideboard is cleaning up kind of the second and third tier of Jacob's deck in the matchup. But Elspeth is still largely unchecked.
Other side of things for Jacob, you see his 2s and 1s in his sideboard. That gives him a lot of options because he has a bunch of singletons, and with Sidisi in his deck, he actually has the ability to go find them. So, he's got a lot of nice options available. An additional ultimate price, card like Bile Blight, Ugin if the game goes long enough, Duress potentially. You mentioned End Hostilities. A lot of nice stuff here for Jacob.
Jacob's deck kind of has the same recipe as Reed's deck has, who we're waiting for his semifinal against Chris Anderson here in a little bit. Not quite to the same degree, but they're both playing control decks where they have a bunch of one-ups where it's just fine if they draw them. You draw an Ugin, that's fine. You draw an End Hostilities, that's fine in the matches where you're bringing it in. But they're so powerful to be able to tutor for as well. So they're not pure tutor targets and they're not pure fun-ups. They're somewhere in the middle.
The update for you guys on Todd Anderson and Jason Coleman. They are still in game number 3. It's a 1-1 split there. And it looks like Jason has a Sorin on 8 counters right now.
Not necessarily a lock
against
tokens, but probably a sign that he's winning.
Probably fairly good spot for Jason Coleman to be in.
Sorin's been in play for 1,000 turns, and he's gained a bunch of life as a result, Not saying that he's won for sure, but odds are.
Well, you did mention states. That's coming up in 2 weeks. And that's part of our Season 2 schedule. Of course, the Open Series will be off that weekend. 4 states are the Pro Tour. And if you're not qualified for Pro Tour Dragons Dark here, you can't head out to Star City Games State Championship. It's a new way of go about doing things because we have not 1, but 2.
Right, we have a Saturday standard event. You can play these decks that you're seeing right now in our Invitational Top 8. Sunday is Modern. Head over to starcitygames.com/states for more information. If you are fortunate enough to top 8 one of the standard state championships, you will receive this top 8 playmat. And then the following day, on Sunday, during our Modern states, if you happen to top 8, you get this playmat as well. If you are able to top 8 both of them, well, you get this.
You put them together, and it looks awesome.
And by this, I mean we don't give you the 2 of them stapled together. What I mean is you now own 2 of them, and you can produce this piece of art yourself.
Clarification is key.
Because people do take those sort of things seriously.
They do.
When you claim that you're going to give out a certain prize and then do not.
We want to make sure it's very clear that you have to put them together yourself. Some assembly required.
Staple, sew it, but we don't actually give you this. You just own it now. StarCityGames.com/states for more information.
You're getting really good at this. I got to tell you.
I got a little bit of a background in legalese, I thought that was what I was going to do when I was a kid, so I'm good at clarifying things. Trademarks and copyrights.
Those are important.
Oh, yeah.
People really take that stuff serious.
Because that's the easiest way for the Open Series to end. Let's mess it up, something like that.
That's bad for us. That's bad for us. I don't really have any prospects outside of this,
right,
so that'd be bad for us.
I guess I'm back to playing in Magic tournaments. I don't know.
Cool. Merriam going to take a look at it opening hand. Looks like he's going to keep again, as will Wilson. So these players not doing much mulliganing. They're fine with their openers. Merriam going to start this one at 21 yet again, thanks to Rugged Highland. Wilson, you have to imagine his first land will enter the battlefield tapped, since it oftentimes does when you're playing Abzan, especially a control version. He's got a Sandstep Citadel at the ready, and he will go with that yet again. Merriam with a Temple. Take a look at the top card. It will become the bottom card. Does he have an Elvish Mystic? He does. So a little bit of acceleration as Wilson will take a draw step. Caves of Koilos and a passing of the turn back to Merriam. Ross's 3rd turn of the game. There is a Forest. This is a Xenagos. Now this is a threat that's pretty nice here.
This is great. We saw what happened in game 2 there when Ross accelerated to a creature that can be tagged by ultimate price on the draw. And that tempo swing really determined how that game played out. This, the token can't be ultimate priced, and even if it could be, I don't think Jacob would want to.
I don't think so either. Now, he may have some interest in perhaps ultimate pricing a Elvish Mystic if he has it, but does not look to be the case, as we have just now been informed that Jason Coleman has won game number 3. So he's up 2 games to 1 over Todd Anderson. Abzan Aggro has the lead against Jeskai tokens, as Wilson does play a Temple Malady, puts the top card to the bottom, deploys a Fleece Mane Lion, has to take 1 to do so, and we will go back Merriam's way. Now for Ross, the window is open for something pretty nice this turn.
This feels like the first game where you're like, Ross is probably winning right now. The 2 games thus far have been, he's gotten off to early starts, Jacob's blunted them, and then the game's got out of control.
A Roast will take care of Fleet's main line. Xenagos will make a token. He'll come across for 5, will Merriam. Is there a follow-up play? It looks like he may have a copy of Heir of the Wilds and Rattleclaw Mystic in hand, but he's just going to pass the turn back. Maybe a little afraid of a card like Drown in Sorrow.
Yeah, that's a card where I think that it's about even whether or not Jacob brought that card in. But Ross is doing so well right now that he has the luxury of playing around it a little bit.
Temple will allow Jacob to leave his top card on top. You see Jacob does have a copy of Hero's Downfall in hand. Xenagos has gotten a lot of work done this game, that's for sure.
I played ahead of schedule in a spot where Jacob may have been holding up mana for removal. And even if Jacob has a downfall for it, the damage is already done.
Decisions here for the Pro Tour runner-up. See, he's got a Siege Rhino there. Wants to get to that point. Also has multiple copies of Hero's Downfall. Looks like he's really considering casting one of those, as those were in the front of his hand. Sending those back and forth. There's the card in question.
I mean, there's a couple things going on here. Jacob might say, well, if I'm playing Siege Rhino next turn, maybe these 2/2 tokens don't matter very much, and I want to leave the downfall up in case Ross has something like Stormbreath Dragon, which will just kill me if I use the downfall right now.
Here's Downfall in the upkeep.
The flip side is he might feel like, well, I just can't let another token come across here.
Merriam will draw. Does Ross have something like a Surak the Hunt Caller? Looks like the answer is no. Not even a Boon Satyr. So just an attack for 5. A pretty tame turn, all things considered.
And now this is a weird spot where, you know, Ross held off by playing around Drown in Sorrow last turn, but now without the Xenagos in play, Drown in Sorrow is really bad for him if he says go. So he played around it last turn, but this turn he may be forced to do it even if he still respects the possibility, because he can't, well, he may not be able to just give up his whole turn.
There's a Morph. Could be anything.
Could be anything.
Head back Wilson's way. Up there, and there's Drown in Sorrow. That may have been off the top of the deck,
That was off
too.
the top.
Yeah. So there goes Merriam's entire board. Wilson will get the scry here as well.
And Ross kind of got the worst of both worlds there,
Sure
where
did.
he, you know, he waits a turn, so he's down the 2 damage that turn, and then feels compelled to play it into the next turn because it's so bad for him regardless. And now he loses the maximum amount of cards and deals the least amount of damage in that whole sequence.
Well, still outs here. As Merriam will sacrifice a Wooded Foothills. But that certainly did sting.
Which is part of the reason I questioned a little bit Ross playing around in the first place. Because if on the turn where Jacob downfalled the Xenagos, if he goes Drown in Sorrow instead, your perspective can be, well, I get to make a token this turn and deploy the rest of my hand. The way that it played out, it froze up Ross that turn and the following turn. And that's sort of the worst case scenario.
It's certainly a tough spot there.
I'm not saying that he should have just dumped his whole hand on the table, but he could have maybe played the Morph the same way he did the following turn.
For sure. And it has what has oftentimes been the case. It's a big draw step for Merriam. He needs a good one. He's reaching for mana. Let's see how good it is. It's an Heir of the Wilds. That's it. So not great. Wilson with the Bioblight now in his hand. See the Siege Rhino there. Looks like Tassiger too.
And now this is a spot where Jacob definitely has the tools to win the game, and he's just an issue of protecting himself from things like Stormbreath Dragon and Crater's Claws, which are Ross's biggest draws from this stage.
There is Tassiger. Merriam with the draw. Roast looking to take care of Tassiger. Gets the job done. Here comes Heir of the Wilds. That's dead. Follow-up. Elvish Mystic pass the turn back. Wilson will draw. Llanowar Waste. That'll come into play. Jacob will separate his mana a little bit. Here's the Siege Round. Up to 10 he goes. Down to 17 goes Merriam.
This is his offense and his way to pull himself out of Crater's Claws range. Stormbreath Dragon still potentially alive, though I believe Jacob with ultimate price in hand.
There's Surak. Ultimate Price will take care of that. Wilson on tap, take a draw. In comes the Rhino. Was playing defense, now playing offense. Pass the turn back. Merriam will draw. In comes Elvish Mystic. Wilson down to 9. Does he have a follow-up? He does in Air of the Wilds. Kick it back over to Wilson. Will Merriam.
Jacob with just Downfall and Forest in hand.
That is a Courser. Means we can see the top card of the deck, which is a Siege Rhino. There's a Forest, gain a life. Here comes the Rhino. There's a block. Here's a Downfall, which means that Wilson gets a trample over for 4 points of damage.
Yeah, Jacob doing it like that because it's basically a free roll there. If Ross elects to not block, well then the whole Siege Rhino comes across and you keep the Downfall in hand. And because the Rhino has trample, when the blocker is removed before damage, the whole comes across to Ross's face.
We've said it once, we'll say it again. Merriam needs to draw Stormbed Dragon. That really gives him his best shot, I think. Maybe getting back into this thing.
Yeah, even running Crater's Claws doesn't do the trick now because of the Siege Rhino that Jacob's drawing next turn.
Merriam looking over things. Crater's Claw is going to take care of the Rhino. We can't go upstairs with this. All I can do is pass the turn back. Rhino's the draw. Top card of the deck is a Thoughtseize. Courser coming in. Merriam down to 7. Let's make it 4.
So I like this play a lot from Ross last turn because this means if he draws Siege Rhino, he can hang back on defense.
If you draw Stormbed.
Excuse me. He can hold that back on defense.
Well, there are lands, and it's an extension of the hand. Jacob Wilson is going to win this match here over Ross Merriam. 3 games to 0. Obs control, dispatches, green-red aggro in rather simple fashion. As all Merriam can do is shake his head. It's a lost opportunity for him to head back to the Players' Championship. But Jacob Wilson is one step closer. He'll be playing the winner of Todd Anderson and Jason Coleman.
So, Ross, you see 5th place in our standings right now. A player I believe will make it to the Players' Championship one way or the other. You'd like to lock it up right now, but that was a butt kicking. There's no two ways about it.
It was one-sided.
Jacob's draws were solid, but you saw that he had a pretty big advantage in the way that the games played out there. Able to pretty easily break serve against Ross's openings. And then from there, his card quality way too high, and Elspeth is just a huge headache for Ross.